Oh, and they have answers for you this evening. It looks like you all have come to the right webinar tonight. Filling in learning gaps, ways to remediate students, all of the insights they're hoping to gain are coming in, and I can assure you that a lot of what you're looking for, you will hear in tonight's webinar. Loving the questions, and we'll get a chance to have our panelists respond to these. So it looks like our presenters will be providing just what you were looking for. And now Denise will take us through our agenda and introduce the first panel of presenters. Denise?
Yes. So one of the things that we did during the first webinar, of course, we talked about the 2 documents that were published by Student Achievement Partners and the Council addressing unfinished learning after school closures, and of course, prioritizing essential content. So tonight we wanted to spend our time focusing on not just the documents themselves, but taking it in terms of how districts have actually implemented it and how it specifically looks in classrooms. And so we've had this nice little marriage between looking at how it looks from the district office and then how it's actually been translated into practice. And so we're going to spend our time really doing that tonight. You're going to hear from 3 school districts: Denver Public Schools, San Diego Unified School District, and San Antonio Independent School District. If we could go to the next slide. And so right now we want to transition, and we're going to hear from Kathy Martin, Emily, and Laura, who will talk to us about translating those documents into practice. So Kathy Martin, we're going to turn to you first.
Okay, next slide, please. And then the next slide. So what we want to do tonight, good evening, is to share with you the work that we began last spring and continue today to accelerate unfinished learning. So we're going to look at math, but we did a parallel work in literacy. So on this slide, you see the Denver Public Schools 3 cornerstones. And so as we approached accelerating unfinished learning, we were guided by these cornerstones. These 3 are essential to our work in accelerating our students' unfinished learning that results in breaking the historical patterns of inequity in our district. On the next slide, next slide, please. In anticipation of this school year, we developed resources to support teachers in maximizing the time left in spring 2020 to focus deeply on the essential work of the current grade level to support student engagement in grade level learning this fall. And on the slide, you see an example of 3rd grade math. We also directed K-8 teachers to provide descriptive feedback on student work rather than providing grades. And this feedback would identify and communicate to students and parents student strengths in terms of the essential grade level work. Next slide. In planning professional learning for the 2021 school year, beginning with our summer leadership weeks, our goal was to support teachers and leaders in knowing the resources that were available to them, and in knowing how to use these resources. And Laura will share some of those with you in a few minutes. At the same time, we knew it was imperative that leaders and teachers developed a positive mindset around acceleration. So next slide. In June, we began with focusing deeply about the difference between acceleration and remediation, seen on this table. We wanted leaders and teachers to know that remediation is based on the misconception that for students to learn new information, they must go back and master everything they missed. Thus, remediation focuses on the gaps students have in their learning and drills students on isolated skills and topics with little resemblance to the current curriculum, thus leading to academic gaps that fail to narrow. In contrast, acceleration strategically prepares students for success in the present. This week on this content, acceleration focuses on the opportunities students have for new learning and addresses incomplete understandings in the context of the new learning, thus preparing students for success in the present. Next slide. In order to accelerate unfinished learning, teachers need, among other things, a deep understanding of the standards at their grade level, standards at the previous grade level to provide an understanding of how to address unfinished learning, and standards at the next grade level to provide a perspective on the critical concepts students need to know before leaving the current grade. They also need a deep understanding of their curricular materials and resources and how student learning is sequenced throughout the year. To accomplish this, we've engaged teachers and leaders in unit internalization. Next slide. Internalization is a process where educators intellectually prepare to teach a unit or lesson based on their curriculum materials. In Denver, we have District K-12 adopted curriculum materials, so teachers don't need to design a unit. What they need to do is to deeply understand the provided unit resources and how to maximize those resources to support their students. Internalization also supports educators in deepening their content knowledge and understanding of grade level standards, thereby better equipping them to plan for and instruct with just-in-time scaffolds and feedback to accelerate unfinished learning. Next slide. Emily will share more about unit internalization in a few minutes, but I want to give you a quick overall view of the process. Participants begin by taking the unit assessment as part of their pre-work, and then begin their in-person session with reflecting on our culturally responsive mindsets, particularly the mindset of high expectations, to ensure that as we engage in the discussion around the unit, we do so with asset-based mindsets around the work our students are capable of doing. Up next is an orientation to the unit's essential learning, and then internalizing the scope and sequence resources, followed by reflection on the learning and identification of next steps. So on the next slide, I now invite Laura to talk about her work in accelerating student learning at Park Hill Elementary.
Hello, I'm Laura Newberg, a third grade teacher at Park Hill Elementary in Denver, Colorado. I am pleased to have been asked to share with you how my third grade team approaches and plans for accelerated learning. My team consists of 4 teachers, interventionists, and 2 paraprofessionals. Next slide, please. The resources we rely heavily on at the beginning to plan a unit come from our district as well as from our district's adopted curriculum, Bridges in Mathematics. From the district, we have scope and sequence documents, which provide us with guidance when addressing unfinished learning, identifying priority focus standards for the third grade, and accelerating unfinished learning supports for each unit. The scope and sequence documents provide unit overviews that identify the priority focus standards for that unit, as well as identifying prerequisite skills students will need to be successful. From the Bridges curriculum, we rely on the unit overviews, which includes the mathematical background of the content and the strategies models the students will engage in. Also found in the unit overviews is the skills across the grade levels chart that shows how the major skills and concepts of the unit are addressed, not only within the grade level, but how they are addressed across the grade levels. Another document that aids us in accelerating unfinished learning is the support and intervention page. And I will show you examples of these in the next few slides. Next slide, please. This is a diagram of the approach we use to address unfinished learning. Using these parts of this approach, understand, diagnose, and take action, acts as a map for my team as we plan the units and lessons. Next slide, please. Here is the approach to address unfinished learning as it appears in our scope and sequence documents. Next slide, please. This is an example of what the Accelerating Unfinished Learning document looks like for our third grade, Unit 1. The priority instructional content standard is identified, which is 3OAD8. In the Understand section, we can see that 2OAA1 has been identified as the prerequisite skills students will need to access grade level content. In the Diagnose section, they have indicated that we can use a Bridges screener for the Unit 1 and an item from another assessment. The Take Action section offers where to look in the curriculum for lessons and activities that are already embedded to provide that just-in-time instruction. Next slide, please. This is an example of the skills across the grade levels chart for Unit 1. We use this chart to see which standards are emphasized during this unit and the expectations for student learning during the unit. It also tells us what the expectation level was for the learning in the previous year, where else it will appear in the grade, and the expectations for the next year. Next slide, please. The Support and Intervention page also offers us vital information while planning. It indicates where students should be at this point in the year after engaging with the content of the unit. It also provides information as to what we as teachers need to be concerned about if students are struggling and suggests resources that we can turn to. Next slide, please. As a team, we value collaboration and believe that all members of the team must be involved. We insist on having a weekly common planning time. We believe that there must be consistency across the grade levels. Our lessons are the same in each of the 4 classes. There may be a different teacher, but the content, strategies, models, language, and supports are all the same. During our meetings, we plan out the schedule of lessons using the scope and sequence documents. Every week, we bring student work that we identified as exemplars for student understanding and progress of the priority standard and prerequisite standard. We discuss trends observed and plan the upcoming lessons based on all of those observations. As a team, we discuss what tools we want to use to monitor student understanding of the skills and concepts. Additionally, we create daily exit tickets that provide immediate feedback on student understanding. When looking at our lessons together, we carefully select strategies and models to support our students, always thinking about how the students are accessing the content and demonstrating understanding of the content. We want to ensure that the lessons are engaging, rigorous, and meaningful. We provide small groups for math 2 to 3 times a week, and this is where a great deal of differentiation takes place based on the needs of the students in each group. Included in the small group session is additional support for the prerequisite skills, as well as support for the content addressed in the daily lessons. Next slide, please. And
hi. Okay. It's really lovely to meet everyone virtually, I guess. My name's Emily Felsenthal, and I am the math senior team lead at Lake Middle School in Denver. I'm very proud to be a Lake Knight. In Denver, the senior team role lead is a 50-50 teaching and coaching position. So I teach 2 blocks of 8th grade math each day and then coach our math team. Next slide, please. There we go. So as Kathy mentioned at the beginning, one of the major ways in which we plan to accelerate unfinished learning is through our unit internalization process in Denver. In middle school, we use the Open Up Math curriculum created by Illustrative Mathematics. And as I'm sure you can imagine, we've learned a lot in these first few months of school. Today, I'm going to just share my 3 biggest takeaways that I thought would be most helpful. Next slide. All right, so my first big takeaway is that equity can be, and maybe must be, at the core of the conversation. At Lake, we serve a very high need population, and we're often presented with the many statistics about how students in poverty, students of color, and English learners underperform in school. So we start and end all of our unit internalizations with a focus on equity. We ground ourselves in how this process helps us plan effective instruction for all of our students. And we close by thinking about strategies we can use within that specific unit to support productive struggle for the different groups of students that we serve. By both starting and ending these sessions with equity, we are better able to approach that unit with an equity mindset. Next slide, please. My second takeaway, building off of that equity work, is that language matters and thus plays a central role in our work to address unfinished learning. An important part of the internalization process is breaking down the Common Core standards. As we break down standards addressed in each unit, historically, we have focused on the concepts and skills within that unit. Now, as you can see, we also focus on the academic language needed to be successful in that unit. By anticipating the academic language we need students to use, we're better able to plan appropriate supports like sentence ends before the unit even begins. This has been tremendously impactful as we've worked to maintain high rigor in our classrooms this year. Next slide, please. And lastly, I call my final takeaway, dig for the gold. There are so many standards to teach and so much depth to each standard, and our students didn't complete their learning in the spring. We refuse, though, to lower the bar of excellence for our students at Lake, but we also recognize that we do have limited time. We've learned to navigate that challenge by digging for gold, really taking time in this process to identify the biggest ideas of the unit. What are the most important conceptual understandings students must learn in this unit? And how does that fit into the greater context or trajectory of their math career? By focusing our instruction on the highest leverage concepts, the ones that will have the greatest long-term impact for their math success, we're able to narrow our scope and provide more meaningful, rigorous instruction for all of our students. Next slide.
I just want to thank, fantastic, and I just want to thank Emily, Laura, and Kathy. You already have some questions that have come in through the chat, and we'll hold those questions until the end. So thank you again. And now we're going to transition from talking about unit internalization with Denver. We're going to go to the West Coast and talk about how they have actually looked at addressing unfinished learning and prioritizing standards by focusing on those 2 things. And we're going to have Allie, Sarah, and Molly with us right now. And so I'm just going to turn it over very quickly to Allie to talk about how they translated this into practice.
Thank you so much, Denise. I want to thank you first for connecting us with Denver. I think we need to join districts, and it sounds like San Antonio is going to give us some amazing information too. So maybe we can create a super district. I'm here to provide just a little bit of context and then hand it over to the people that are doing this hard work in the classroom, Sarah and Molly. We're focusing today, while we did do we're going to give you a sense today of the context of how we address unfinished learning and the prioritization TK through 12, but in the view that we're really going to be giving you today is a close-up of what we did in secondary mathematics, so middle school and high school. June, you can go to the next slide. So I'm Allie Martinez. I'm the instructional coordinator for TK through 12. Sarah Fertera is going to give you some information about middle school, and then Molly Kaimak is going to give us a sense of what's going on in high school and how our prioritization and our approach to addressing unfinished learning, how it's taking shape in practice. 1 second while I yell at my husband to stop washing the dishes. I am so embarrassed and so sorry. Okay, let's move forward. Pretend that didn't happen. So I'm going to give you a quick sense of, June, you can advance us to the next slide. When we went into distance learning, we began by talking to stakeholders in our system, teachers, families, and students. And what we found is that there was a fear that unfinished learning was going to somehow stop learning, or that we somehow needed to slow down learning. And in some cases, there were families that were even requesting that students not even move forward in the grade level. So as a math department, we came together and developed principles for instructional design for 2021. And as we presented those were adopted district-wide across all content areas. Our four principles are really around moving forward. The first is that all students would move forward with rigorous grade level content. We knew that in the face of decreased instructional time, we'd have to focus on high priority content and in turn cut low priority content. Similar to what the work that Denver was doing, we really wanted to increase access and inclusion and agency by supporting students with just-in-time supports versus just-in-case. And we made a very clear, clear stake by telling all stakeholders in our group that we were not going to ask for wide-scale comprehensive diagnostic assessments at the beginning of our school year. And lastly, we knew that we had to develop, in the face of knowing that the system itself could be hybrid, fully distance, or anything you can imagine. We knew that whatever we were going to be offering our teachers in the classroom, it had to be really flexible, depending on what environment we were going into. So with that, we consulted with all of our favorite people. We talked to the student achievement partners. The Council of Great City Schools came out with their support of how they would address unfinished learning. And in our secondary space, our core curriculum is illustrative mathematics, which came out with guidance for how to prioritize during distance learning. And as a result, I'm going to give you a quick glance into how we did our prioritization. What we did is we first triangulated lessons and units as they corresponded to those core domains. We focused on activities that highlighted experience that fostered the SMPs. And we were really looking to fine tune and focus around math language routines, modeling, and opportunities for students to really engage in mathematics that matters. A really important point that I just want to make sure we really hit home is that we didn't prioritize standards because we didn't want to, in a sense, move backwards where teachers were looking at mathematics as a series, a checklist of standards or skills that students needed to master this year with a decreased instructional time. Instead, we really wanted to focus on larger conceptual understandings, which you can see in the Council of Great City Schools represented as those larger domains. So with that, I am going to drop into the chat after I pass this forward to Molly. You can move forward to the next slide, June. I'm going to give you access to our prioritization and the work that we've done, but I'm just going to hand it right over to Sarah, who's going to give you a sense of how we addressed unfinished learning and the prioritization once we handed them some resources. What did it look like when it came to life in 2021? So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Sarah.
Hi, thank you. So I'm Sarah Fertera. I've been teaching math to 6th graders in San Diego for about 6 years now. Just to give a little context, I know some of you guys were asking earlier, like, what does the situation look like in the chat? So we're in complete distance learning right now. My school has chosen to be in a quarter system, so I see 2 groups of students over these 9-week chunks. And so I teach them math for an hour a day, and then they're sent off. They have about an hour of the asynchronous in the afternoon as well. So that's just the context there. If you can go to the next slide. And so I'm going to respond to these questions for you all. And there we go. Okay. So our district's prioritization has been a hugely helpful planning tool for me this year. So I'm going to be honest, I will say I feel at the moment I might not really be able to get to everything that's in the prioritization because really if you see like my number one on the prioritization here is community. And I do feel like if I'm moving at a pace that's not working for my students, then students are dropping out of the math community. And especially during this time of distance learning, so important to be constantly checking in with them and assessing them and seeing, are they following? Are they keeping up with this? Are they feeling like they're part of this community? And then reaching out to them and giving them feedback if there's places where they're struggling. I think we can all relate to that. I really love what the district did with prioritization because instead of prioritizing standards, as Ali mentioned, they prioritized the math practices. And so I feel that really even if we aren't able to hit every standard, if we are teaching our students the reasoning and the communication skills that they need in math, we're setting them up for success for their future learning. So they're going to hit that standard someday, you know, somewhere along the way. But if they have these reasoning skills, I feel that they can be successful with it. So in terms of addressing unfinished learning, I feel this is something that I do every year. Students are always coming in with a huge variety of different skills and knowledge in different areas. So it always starts with assessment, but not a large scale assessment, but instead just smaller scale assessments similar to what Denver was talking about as well, just these pre-unit assessments. I feel that can be more practical because you can go back to that information more easily throughout the unit. The illustrative math curriculum, that's the curriculum that we're using. And they have something called a Check Your Readiness assessment for each unit. And it has questions on it that give insight as basically how well students understand concepts that might prepare them for that unit. And that's a starting point. So from there, I can get an idea of what students are bringing with them. And then I have to be really thoughtful in my planning. So I have to first think about what my students really need to access the curriculum. So for example, if you go to the next slide, you can see at the top an example. This is from the Check Your Readiness assessment, the very top rectangle up there with some tick marks on it. Students were asked to find the area of the rectangle. 18 of them were successful, which is great. 7 were not. And the most common mistake was that students were finding the perimeter instead of the area. So that concept of being able to find the area of a rectangle was really important because in the unit that we were going into, students were going to be reasoning about the area of other shapes based on what they knew about the area of rectangles. So because that concept was central to the unit and enough students struggled, I knew it needed some revisiting. The first step was to revisit as a whole class in sort of shorter chunks and build on the understanding that many students were bringing to the table. There's 18 of them that have some understanding here that they can build into this math community. So we went through some activities relating them to the concepts of area. You can see on the bottom left, there's that quick review, whole class approach. That was done as a lesson warm-up, and there's a few others like that. What's nice is they're built into the illustrative math curriculum, these sort of going back and visiting, revisiting these concepts in these shorter chunks. And that starts to get the student remembering, oh, okay, that's right, right? And so I started to have more and more understanding. But I will say, if you look at the bottom right, you can see there's a square within a square. And so we just kept moving forward, but we're still looking at that same skill. So they still have to be able to find the area of a rectangle. It's just that this time they have to find the area of 2 rectangles and they have to do some higher level thinking here and think, okay, well, I need to subtract the area of that one there. So they're using some of those math reasoning strategies. And you can see here that there's a student that was still not understanding the concept of area a few lessons in. So they're giving something about 4 sides and 5 centimeters. So they multiplied 4 times 5. And that's not exactly how it works. So this is where I really have to look at the data and understand, okay, this student, and there were a few others as well, that needed further intervention. So I was able to pull those students into a small group and do a further mini lesson on this where we really focused on the concept of area and we looked at shapes on the grid. And that worked really well at this particular time. But there's other times where you have to pull another just-in-time strategies. So it could be something like assigning a YouTube tutorial or assigning a Khan Academy lesson to a group of students and then checking back in with them as well. So something like that might work too. So those are just a couple of examples of how I tackle unfinished learning. And yeah, that's my part.
And then we'll pass it over to Molly, our high school teacher. And if we can award her 1 minute for my husband's noisiness, if that's okay.
All good. I'm a fast talker anyways. If you could move to the next slide. I'm Molly, and I'm teaching integrated math 1 right now. And I just wanted to start off by saying that unfinished learning is not really something new. I think for most of us, like every year, there's always unfinished learning, whether it's because students have forgotten or I hardly ever am able to cover every standard anyway. So this idea of filling in gaps is kind of the norm, to be honest, at least for me. And so the way that I've always addressed unfinished learning is instead of trying to backtrack and teach everything all at once, we as a district have, like Ali and Sarah said, utilize just-in-time supports. And so the illustrative math curriculum has been really great at giving low floor, high ceiling tasks, especially to start off units. And this is super helpful. So every student is able to access the learning, really no matter what their prior knowledge is with the specific content. And really in terms of a priority standards, we don't have priority standards. We do, sorry. We do have certain prioritized standards, but really our priority as a district is, are students becoming better problem solvers? Are they becoming better math communicators? Are they building numeracy over the course of our course, and less on like, do they know how to do this specific thing in math? So I really appreciate that. And then based on the data that I collect from these like kind of entry activities, I'm able to sort of address misconceptions as we go, specifically in class. And then and in class time, I'm using mostly to be doing these like interactive tasks and cooperative learning. And then I really utilize the asynchronous time to maybe record video lessons, like if I think some students need more direct instruction or something like that. So I reserve that for asynchronous time and maybe like the flex time or office hours tutoring. So next slide, I just wanted to give you an example of a low floor, high ceiling task. Card sorts are awesome. I think every student can sort cards into groups, which is amazing. And the thing that's awesome about the illustrative math curriculum is they build in kind of previous content into new content. So for example, an intro to domain and range inputs, but even within it, you can see this was a very common way that students were sorting it. This was from Desmos, which by the way, Desmos Activity Builder is amazing, gives you a lot of great data all at once. This was a very common way students were sorting. And as you can see, a lot of the students were sorting the fractions as impossible, but the decimals as possible. And so that allowed us to have kind of a conversation about maybe some of that unfinished learning around decimal versus fraction form, and maybe clarify that in real time as opposed to just in case. So, and then other things that it addresses, you could see like area, negative numbers, all other prior knowledge, even though this was technically a domain and range activity. So yeah, I know it's just one example, and you guys, I'm with everyone here. It's a struggle, and one example doesn't fix everyone's problems, but hopefully it's somewhat helpful. Thanks.
Thank you so much, the team from San Diego. We really appreciate it. So in mathematics, we've heard about unit internalization, and we've also heard that while San Diego's been focusing on prioritizing standards and looking at essential content, that they have spent a lot of time on building community. And I think those were some of the questions that we saw in the chat box actually address that. So we went out west, and we're going to go back to the Midwest, but we focused on mathematics so far, and now we're going to turn to San Diego and look at ELA, how this looks for ELA. And I'm going to turn it over to Robin Hall.
Thank you, Denise. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Olivia Hernandez and Rebecca De Leon from San Antonio Independent School District. They will focus on how they develop systems of support for addressing unfinished learning and essential content in English language arts and literacy. They will also describe their theory of action and how it is being operationalized in their classrooms now. Olivia and Rebecca?
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. And I think I have access to the video, to the screen now. Okay, let me try that again. Okay, thank you very much. And it's my pleasure to be here on behalf of San Antonio ISD and a total team behind me in addressing unfinished learning in San Antonio ISD. We're going to focus on 5 main really topics and learnings that we've had throughout this time as we have been addressing unfinished learning since the spring until today. Our focus will be on depth over breadth. And I just wanted to let you know that here in San Antonio ISD, we're serving 90% Hispanic population and 90% economically disadvantaged across 100 sites. And the events around the COVID-19 pandemic have been really challenging, but we are committed to take a very comprehensive and thoughtful approach to ensuring that all our students are prepared to address the socio-emotional needs. And our students also, we want them to be engaged in high quality, rigorous, and remote in-person instruction. We really took to heart the 6 principles and strategies for addressing unfinished learning recommended by the Council of Great City Schools, and immediately started working on some critical changes that needed to take place in our district in order to ensure that all our students and families were engaged. And the 5 most critical changes that San Antonio ISD has gone through to address unfinished learning are breadth over depth. We really want to focus on the quality of instruction and not try to cover so many standards during this time, but really focus on the quality of instruction. Also, mastery-based assessments and grading. It's very critical. We've had to start a process in shifting our mindset around how we grade our students, all the formative assessments, and really having a more asset-based ideology and ensuring that we're grading our students for what they learn and not necessarily for what they're doing. We also focus on change in literacy practices, moving away from some practices that we had, such as level readers, addressing level readers or leveling students, leveling their readers, and also really focusing on complex text and foundational skills. We also had a strong focus on equity and access. We've been ensuring that all our instructional practices are culturally and linguistically relevant for our students. And last but not least, also our social and emotional components. We focused that to ensure the wellness of our students and families during COVID. So the story of San Antonio ISD in the next timeline that you see here is you're going to see a lot of links here. I'm not going to be able to share every single document, but we purposefully added a lot of links here so that you will, when you get this presentation, you'll be able to access many of our documents. And so as you well know, COVID hit when we were in the middle of spring break. I remember I was in the middle of spring break, got the phone call, and we had our academic leadership team. All of us, I was in my backyard. We were all in different places, brainstorming what we were going to do. And during spring break, we came up with our digital PD choice board By the time we came back from spring break, we launched a digital choice board for all our students and families. And we were, of course, online. Students were at home, but they were very, very engaged. Um, I have to say that this is a total team effort because it included the curriculum department, it included the technology department, it included the social and emotional department. Everybody came through to really make things happen in San Antonio ISD, addressing social and emotional needs, literacy, and really stepping up and learning ourselves and planning a lot of PD. We have a timeline here that I'm sharing with you what we went through the spring. In the summer, it was 100%, just PD, professional development for our teachers, for our parents, and for our principals on how we were going to move into this new form of learning. And more than anything, we also in San Antonio ISD have master teachers that helped create lessons. So we knew that when our teachers would come back, they were going to find a brand new system, and they were going to have to start creating lessons online, and that was going to be new. But we have master teachers that were able to create those lessons for them. They showed up to school or to the district earlier before school started and started creating those lessons, and so did the district office. So here is a timeline of all of the events that are happening. And just to address spring 2021, we also are focused on acceleration. We have an asset-based ideology, and we know that our students are learning today. They're learning at home. They're learning technology standards, and we're focused on acceleration versus remediation also. This slide has links of all the different documents that have been created in San Antonio ISD, from the school opening document in which you can find all types of schedules and the schedules and how we address every one of the content areas. You also have a document that was submitted to TEA, the Texas Education Agency. Every district in Texas had to submit a plan on how we were going to address student engagement, how the time and family engagement, professional development, and which instructional materials we were using for every one of our content areas. In addition, we have a plan on how to bring in technology and all the different tools to enhance learning. And last but not least, also the social and emotional and academic development plan. You have access. This is public information for everybody. And as I mentioned, it's a total team effort. One of the first, let's see, there you go. This is a sample of the choice board. And when we started right after spring break, we had a certain version of our choice boards for every single content area. That included PE, fine arts, math, science, social studies, and reading, and everything was posted on our website in English and in Spanish. We are very committed that everything that is delivered to our families and our teachers is in English and in Spanish. We have a total of 50 dual language campuses in San Antonio ISD, so we work in tandem with the curriculum department and the English language arts department to ensure that everything that is produced for our students in dual language is also in Spanish. But the story here is that we knew that we needed to upgrade our choice board, and we were learning also on how to create lessons that were more engaging. So the process was that our district staff also was very invested in learning and in bringing in the tools. And I want to really thank our technology department that really stepped up in providing professional development for our staff also. So these choice boards that you see here that you can access also and take a look at some of the sample lessons that we had, we brought in other tools where students were a lot more engaged in creating projects. And it was kind of like a project-based activity. Okay, this is a sample of a biliteracy lesson. In San Antonio ISD, as I mentioned, we have dual language, and the district supported our teachers with 4 weeks of lessons. All of our, the executive director for curriculum instruction and the executive director for bilingual education, the director for language arts, etc. Everybody in the district got together, including all our specialists, and started creating lessons for teachers in all content areas so that they could see an exemplar lesson and learn within the first 4 weeks until they were able to also produce their own lessons on Canvas. We knew that this was going to be something new for our teachers, especially because we were also introducing our new management system, which is Canvas in San Antonio. So we also prioritize our standards. Our Office of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment worked early on in the summer to prioritize standards in all content areas. And you can see there in yellow, that is the Focus 2021. Those are the standards. And when you click into some of those links that you have in there, that will take you into a guidance document where we provided our teachers different activities that they could do with their students during synchronous time and during asynchronous time to address those standards. The same thing happened in Spanish. So as you can see in San Antonio ISD, one of the commitments that we have is to work as one team. We don't have a separate bilingual department that works in isolation, but the bilingual department and the curriculum department, especially all content areas, math, science, social studies, and English language arts, all work together as a team, and everything that comes out in English and in Spanish. This is another example of our priority focus standards. The directors spent a lot of time investing in selecting these standards very, very carefully and supporting teachers through PLNs, and they support campuses directly during the PLNs so that they can support teachers in their lesson planning. Following, the next one is a biliteracy unit. In our dual language programs, you have a link here to our dual language model also. Our dual language program, we know how complex it is to deliver instruction in English and in Spanish, but we have stayed the course, and most of our synchronous instruction in San Antonio ISD, our remote synchronous instruction is in Spanish, and our asynchronous instruction is in English. And teachers have access to these biliteracy units for every grade level from kinder through 5th grade. And we also, the bilingual department provides them support in creating these lessons based on the standards. It's 6:50. These are the schedules that we use that you can also find in our manuals. We had a lot of professional development. And this is very important, this next piece, the academic acceleration plan, which is going to be implemented in the spring, where we're focusing on accelerating math and reading through high quality on grade level instruction. We are not going back. We are integrating and identifying the gaps and integrating that unfinished learning into the present, into what is being taught that day. We're also using adaptive curriculum software very carefully and ensuring that our campuses are using that curriculum or their software continuously. Small group instruction is part of our schedules, and it's very, very effective, and parents are very happy about small group instruction, and they welcome that very much. We are also bringing in supplemental resources that are aligned to our standards and very targeted professional development. As I mentioned, we're focusing on mastery-based grading, shifting the mindset, and a great focus on our literacy in San Antonio ISD, literacy and biliteracy. We've made many changes, and I'm going to pass it on now to Rebecca De Leon, who will give you more information on what that looks like in our classrooms. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So here we're talking about that alignment piece between the two departments. And this was a key function that we were able to do. I'm trying to see if I can progress the slides, and I'm waiting to see if
I don't know if you hear the ring that I was.
So one of the things that we did before COVID was that we had a literacy task force, and this group was able to really bond and work together into creating a long-term vision for how we want to define literacy in SAISD. And this became really powerful after COVID hit, because this was our decision-making group. When we had to go back and try to engage all stakeholders, this is who we spoke with. Progress the slide. There it is. So one of the big pieces that we want to talk about is equity and access. One of the things that I think COVID has brought out for everyone is, and not just COVID, but we know the other racial tensions that were happening in our society and that our students were really experiencing. All of those pieces were coming together, and it was something that we couldn't ignore anymore. While our district hasn't always made the best decisions in hindsight, as an institution for the population that we serve, we didn't want to continue that practice. We wanted to see this practice as a chance for us to go beyond just education reform, but really talk about education disruption. And so part of that is, how are we accessing the content? And that's through sheltered instruction that we were able to layer that access. And also is about growing our own understanding of racial equity and access. And so the district has invested large sums of money to bring in wonderful speakers like Dr. Latson Billings, like Dr. Muhammad, to talk about these profound issues that are reality in our society right now. And so this work has been so profound in listening to these speakers, and it has been a validating piece for many of our educators, because without this recognition of our current cultural society and how it impacts our students, I don't think any of our educational goals could really be met. And so that also leads to this social emotional piece. One of the key tenets for us was recognizing the reality that COVID happens to have. I think we've all seen the memes for mental health around COVID and the timelines that happen in COVID time, right? And so this was about providing layering of opportunities for our teachers and students to check in with themselves, to find resources, to find releases for all of their stress and tension. Humanizing our work is such a crucial part of being effective educators. And we know that when we humanize our teachers, then we humanize our students. So yes, all the academic plans matter. Yes, we want to accelerate instruction, but we're also doing all of this during a really unique time in history, in a pandemic that none of us have experienced before. And so creating a space for that recognition has been crucial. And that also means engaging with our families in ways that allow them to access the content, because families for the first time have become teachers. And so how do we make that relatable to the everyday person in the child's life who's sitting next to them, the grandmothers, the mothers, the fathers who are trying to engage in that academic work. And so layering that support for our families has been key. And those are the paradigm shifts that we've really been wanting to address.
Thank you so much, Olivia and Rebecca, for sharing your journey along the change management continuum to address unfinished learning and ELA and literacy in San Antonio ISD. What a way to top off the evening. So now we will turn to a question and answer segment of our webinar, and Denise will pose the first question to all of our panelists. Denise?
Yes, and so this was a question that we had in the chat, and so we really would like each district to respond about how are you and fellow teachers incorporating lessons that you've learned from addressing your students' unfinished learning? So how are you incorporating those lessons learned thus far about addressing unfinished learning? And when you answer, there was also a question, I think we can do a twofer. You could indicate whether your district is in fully remote, hybrid, or face-to-face as well, just to give some context.
Denise, I'll jump in for San Diego Unified, and then I invite the other the teachers in San Diego Unified to add as well. I think for us, some of the lessons learned is what's possible with by focusing our lens. There is a lot that we cut from our curriculum, and we still strongly believe that it is a robust curriculum and experience for students. And I think now more than ever, we've had an opportunity to support teachers in doubling down and understanding who are the students in the room, how do they develop and foster a community of math learners within that space before jumping into curriculum, and really addressing what I think Rebecca brought out really beautifully in that last session. So I think addressing community is something that for sure will be a cornerstone of our work moving forward.
Thank you, Allie.
Yeah, in San Antonio ISD, we agree also. It's been addressing our parents. Our parents are now so involved and really wanting to know where their children are. You know, are they learning? They want to know whether they've been successful or they're behind. And so we really needed to step it up with all our parent sessions that we had with all our schools, and teachers had to have every 9 weeks now, really talking to parents one-to-one, letting them know how their students are doing. So definitely the community is essential. And what we've learned is that all our parents were able to get on Zoom. They get on Zoom and they participate and they chat. It's incredible. We have pláticas online, and our parents are just so engaged and eager to help their children. So we've incorporated a lot of community involvement in everything that we do.
Thank you, San Antonio. Denver, if you could also respond and let the audience know whether your district is fully virtual or remote right now, or hybrid, or if your students have come back into the classroom.
So we are right now fully remote. And so we've certainly learning a lot of lessons, and I would invite Laura to add to this, but we're incorporating it in the work that we do with school leaders and with our math and literacy content leads. So Laura, can you speak to how you're doing that in school?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we've really learned, and especially this is, you know, our children, they're little, they're fragile. There's a real big social emotional lift for our students. So we really have done a lot as a school and as a district, really trying to support all of our students and their learning in this very difficult time. And it was really difficult for our kids because we started remote and then we went back to in-person for a very short time, but then we had to go back to remote. But with some of the things that we also learned was we really needed this laser focus in our lessons. And what are we really honing in on, and what is going to be the biggest bang for our buck? Thinking about where are those gaps and how can we use what we know they need and incorporate it into the lessons themselves. One of the great things about the curriculum that we do have is that the beginning units really do a wonderful job of bridging where the students left off at the end of the year, last year, and incorporates it into the first unit for the current year. So it was somewhat easier, I think, for us to be thinking about what do the students need, where can we have the supports, because our curriculum already had a lot of that built in.
Thanks, Kathy and Laura. Really appreciate that. And I know that both Robin and I had additional questions, and we realize it's right now, it's 8:02. But I will tell you, one of the biggest questions that we probably, I don't know if we'll have time to address it adequately, but I know that in Denver, we talked a lot about the unit internalization process and how they engage their school-based leaders in that work. But for San Diego Unified, you've heard a lot about building a sense of community. And I know, Allie, this may put you on the spot in a short amount of time, but I'm just wondering if you could give us a highlight of that work. If you all can hang tight for a couple of minutes, we would really appreciate that so that we can answer that question. So Allie, take it away for a minute or so.
I would love to take it away. All right, June, are you there? Are you still there, June? This will fill your cup, I swear. It takes 2 minutes and 40 seconds. So I'll cue it, I'll talk to it while June cues it up for us. And then Denise, if you don't mind pausing the recording during this section, because we'll share some, we're gonna share some student voice with you. And if you do not mind just pausing the recording during that section. So one of the things that was really important to